Guys today. Rick Blackshaw, who goes by Rickshaw, is a powerhouse footwear industry veteran and entrepreneur who's overseen the sale of more than 500 million pairs of shoes throughout his career. He is the co-founder and CEO of STOKE Shoes, a performance lifestyle footwear brand launched to serve the 65 million American men who have wide feet and are constantly overlooked by the mainstream athletic giants. Before disrupting the wide width footwear market with Stoke, Rick built an incredibly diverse leadership resume. He served as global CEO of CCM Hockey and President of Sperry Top-Sider, President of Keds, VP GM at Chuck Taylor at Converse. Known for his no BS approach to consumer products, Rich specializes in revitalizing heritage brands, identifying massive under-addressed gaps in the global marketplace. Rick, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you spending some time with us and talking us through this monster of a shoe you've built.
You bet, Dylan. My pleasure. It's great to be on the show.
Yeah, so I know I gave a little bit of your background there, but why don't you tell me a little bit about, where'd you study, where'd you grow up, and what got you into the footwear business?
Sure. So I would call myself an inveterate masshole, which if you spent more than 2 decades in Massachusetts, you earned that title. I grew up outside of Boston. I actually went to school at Babson College, which is also outside of out of Boston, and it's really known for their entrepreneurial studies program. That's what they've really made their hill to win on. And I got that degree about 40 years ago, and lo and behold, decades later, I'm actually using that entrepreneurial studies degree. And I think the interesting thing about New England, and I think it's probably skill set and geography and a lot of things, but most of the footwear companies in America are actually in New England, and people have invariably described it as, it was the streams and access to hydropower. It was the skill set of hand sewers that were coming down from Acadia into Maine and New Hampshire. And at the end of the day, I would bet that probably 2/3 of the jobs in footwear are actually in New England, right? Because you've got Converse, you've got Timberland, you've got New Balance, you've got Crocs, you've got Hey Dude, you've got Puma, and I'm sure I'm forgetting about 5 other brands. But for some reason, it's been a hotbed, and it's been a hotbed going back to like the birth of athletic footwear, which kind of all goes back to Chuck Taylor in 1908 and the Converse company. So really it was always kind of around, and I think footwear was definitely of interest to me. And I started back in 1993 actually with Timberland. So I kind of made the rounds of the various footwear companies in New England, which has been fantastic.
I love it. So obviously you have an amazing resume of leading all of these amazing footwear brands. But what was keeping you up at night? What was we talked about in your resume, you've been kind of an expert in helping brands find those unaddressed gaps in the global marketplace. Obviously, you've identified a new one with the 65 million American men who have wide feet. Can you tell us a little bit about the insight? Where did you come up with this product insight, and what got you, so bent out of shape about this problem that you wanted to take a stab at, addressing it as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it wasn't like one moment the light bulb went off, but a confluence of factors. One thing that I always recognized selling shoes that had sort of a core model, whenever you did a model that was a wide version of it, it always seemed to be the highest velocity shoe, right? And if you also factor in that every athletic footwear company, big sneakers, we like to call them, is focused on 13 to 24-year-olds because they think that that's what drives footwear culture. And, I think that's actually true. But at the end of the day, it ignores the fact that, like you said, there's 65 million guys over the age of 25 that have wide feet and are not wearing wide shoes. And I'd always thought about like that sort of mismatch of who everybody's focused on, and the fact that there's so many guys out there. You know, three-quarters of the guys have wide feet, and nobody's really selling to them. And so, you know, I've been thinking about this for 7, 8 years, and finally I said, okay, well, let's give this a bid, and sure glad that I did.
I bet. All right. Well, you guys were nice enough to let me to pick one out of the product catalog. So I've been saving it for this interview. I've taken a peek at them, but I haven't put them on yet. So should we go ahead and give the audience a little bit of peek
Please
about these
do.
bad boys
Please
and how to
do.
get.
I'll get the drum roll drumming.
Let's go. And then I'd love to, have you walk us through some of the innovation, and I'll ask you a few questions on that side. So, I figured if I was going to get, a sample from you guys, I had to go kind of on the wild side. So I went with these bad boys right here. What do you think of that?
I love those bad boys. We can't keep that. So that's the FOMO,
Yep.
which stands for not fear of missing out, but forward motion.
I love
And we
that.
cannot keep that in stock in the camo. Like camo for our guys, definitely catnip.
Mm,
And so certainly as you kind of feel that shoe, right? First off, you're like, wow, it's a pretty big unit, but it's super lightweight. And so we use this injection molded EVA, which is, kind of old school. It's super lightweight. We call that midsole outsole unit our power stack. And the basic idea behind it is it's low durometer, it's high energy return, and it's the thing that delivers what we call the, can I say shit?
yeah, let's go. This is not a
The
family
holy,
friendly podcast.
we call it holy shit comfort, because that literally is the expression that's been used the most when people put the shoes on. They're like, holy shit, these are comfortable, right?
Well, I
And
can't wait to
so,
put them on because I've been keeping them in the box for this interview, but I'm gonna put them on and wear them for the rest of the day after we get off.
yeah, so you'll notice that. You'll also notice super wide platform, what we call the mansplay midsole. And the idea behind that is basically the average guy's foot from when he wakes up in the morning to when he gets home at night grows half a size and half a width, just because of all the pressure,
Wow.
right? And that's why when Dylan, when you take your shoes off at the end of the day, you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad to be out of them. And what this mansplay midsole allows for is there's no cup in the forefoot, right? Most athletic footwear is cupped the whole way around. There's no cup in the forefoot of that shoe, which means the foot can actually expand beyond the upper because the midsole is so wide. And so that's super important. The other thing you'll notice when you put it on is it's got big ball girth, which is, a technical term. And it's basically the circumference of from the ball of your foot to your fifth metatarsal, right? And there's a lot of shoes that might be wide at the net, right, at the midsole, but they don't feel wide because they don't have that toe box volume.
Yeah, they
So
cram they
we
cram in at the end.
yeah, and so we were really focused on, this guy who, again, nobody likes to tie their shoes, so we've got this slip-on stoke out technology, but those four aspects of the shoe are what really delivers comfort for this average guy that's 5'9", he weighs 200 pounds, he's got a powerful build, he's got wide feet, and that's literally all that we thought about as we were constructing this shoe. And that's why it's really hit a nerve. We've got unbelievable 4.8 out of 5 stars for
Mm.
reviews. And people are just freaking out about how comfortable and how convenient these shoes are. So I think those would be some of the things that you'll say, like, I might not remember any of those technologies, but when you put them on, you'll be literally like, holy shit, these are comfortable.
Yeah, I see all that in the kind of the product features on the box here. The other one obviously is the no sweat, being able to create a material that is truly breathable. Do you want to talk at all about that component? I mean, it definitely looks kind of like that, that more mesh material that you're used to with kind of newer sneakers that just breathe real easy and have for that, for the that component of it to make it breathable.
Yeah, so it's breathable. It's also a dynamic four-way stretch.
Mm.
And so again, that allows it to expand as your foot expands throughout the day. So yeah, I mean, we were really thoughtful about how we designed these shoes and who we designed them for. That was kind of, the core point of difference that we have against any other shoes that big sneakers, dishing out.
I love it. All right, so let's talk. Let's get into the insight now. If there was an avatar, if there was a guy out there who kind of represents the brand, is there somebody that comes to mind? Someone that people would be aware of from like kind of an avatar, if you would, so to speak. Like this, if I'm like this guy, personality, the things that I'm into, the build, what I look for in a shoe. Who would you say is kind of an avatar who represents the brand? And who did you have in
Um,
mind?
I don't know that we necessarily had a direct avatar that we kind of pinned on a wall and said it was for this guy. Again, it was just, the average guy in America, 5'9", 200 pounds, wide feet. He probably has a job that sees himself on his feet all day long, right? This guy is not about, running marathons. He's about running his life, right? He's going to his kid's soccer practice. He's, running to the store. He's, doing his yard work on the weekends. He's probably also a great contributor to his community. And you just realize what this guy needs is not some high tech $165 shoe. He just needs something that's going to allow him to run life, that is reasonably priced and is going to be unbelievably comfortable all day long, right? That's who we built it for, and it's unique in the sense that athletic footwear has just simply forgotten this guy.
That's cool. So, talk about the marketing. What did you guys set out to do? Did you want to go direct to consumer first? Did you want to, get plugged into some of the, retail media networks like the Amazons of the world or the other places that are known for footwear or shoe discovery or shoe trial? Tell us a little bit about the go to market.
So go to market. We definitely find this guy typically shops in sporting goods, family footwear, independents, and then if he's in a rural town, this farm and fleet channel, which is super interesting. Small town America has got a Walmart every 10 miles, and then they got these farm and fleet guys like Murdoch's or North 40 or Runnings that sell everything from baby chicks to, feed for your animals to Carhartt to Stokes, right? And it's a great place to shop. They've got incredible folks on the floor. They know everybody that comes in, and they compete really successfully. And so that's where this guy likes to shop. And between that and then our own stokeshoes.com, we're hitting the guy if he likes to go out and try the shoes on, or if he's like, hey, I saw your marketing. It's got some cheekiness to it. I'll try these shoes. And frequently in our reviews, we say, like, there's guys that say, like, I generally don't trust things that I see in social media, but I looked at the price point. I thought it was an interesting proposition. I liked what the shoe looked like. And then lo and behold, a couple weeks later, I bought 3 of these. And so it's just sheer testimonial one after another. And so we're definitely, hitting our target where he likes to shop, be it online or in store.
I love that. And then are you creating kind of a feedback loop there with your marketing? You mentioned kind of a cheeky approach. A lot of times with footwear, you could go into the performance elements or the lifestyle elements, and then humor is maybe like Skechers does that a little bit, but be curious. And then obviously like Crocs, Hey Dude, which I know you had some experience with. So do you want to talk a little bit about the tone of your marketing, the tone of the brand voice, and kind of why you guys decided to go down that particular road?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you think about Big Sneaker, they're peddling this notion of elite performance, right?
Mm.
Buy these shoes, you're gonna run your 10K 4% faster, or it's about being cool. Buy these shoes and you can be like Harry the hipster from Brooklyn, the pickle maker, right? And we know for our guy that's in the middle of the country, and like 80% of consumers that buy athletic sneakers, they never use them for an athletic purpose, right? That's kind of like the big lie of Big Sneaker, right? You're just wearing them to hang out. And so we really wanted to juxtapose Stoke, from Big Sneaker and the seriousness, and like you're gonna win a gold medal if you wear these shoes. Nike has this ad like, my dream is to end yours, like stuff like that. That's absolutely hyperbolic to 80% of the people that wear sneakers. And we wanted to come at it from a very different angle, acknowledging how people actually use their sneakers. We wanted, because we're super focused on the guys, to be male centric and have a male centric sense of humor. That's why you see things like, I hate running unless it's running to get beer. And we're having fun.
Or if an animal's chasing me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that you don't have to be faster than that bear, just faster than the slowest person around you, right? And so um we really wanted to stand out, and we did a lot of brand concept research before we started. We did a really long term fit and wear test. We found out that these guys, for the most part, 3/4 of the guys love these shoes. There was about 15% that did not like them, thought aesthetically they looked ugly.
Mm.
But at the end of the 14 weeks, these guys were like, I wouldn't buy these shoes, but they're the most comfortable shoes I've ever worn, right? But luckily,
Mm.
we had 5 times as many guys saying, I love these shoes. And then when it came time for the brand concept test, we had 88% resonance. We had a third of the guys say, this is my brand. I love this brand, after a 5-minute online, with social media assets. And so that study convinced us that absolutely, we were headed in the right direction, because I've worked for some great brands, but never after 5 minutes would people be saying, like, with some brand they've never heard of, I love this brand, this is my brand, right? And so
Wow.
we know, we also just did a study for the couple thousand people that we have on our mailing list. They scored us, I think it was a 4.6 out of 5 for our content. We have a net promoter score of 79, which, the average footwear brands in kind of that 30 to 40 range. And up in that rarefied air of almost 80 is brands like Costco or Apple. So
Hmm.
we know that we've really hit a sweet spot, and we've got 84% of these guys have actually recommended to other people, their friends and family, how great Stokes are. So we know, sort of conceptually, as we were going into it, they were open to the brand ID, and that they were, a preponderance of the guys loved the shoes. And now we're seeing it, in real life. Unbelievable repeat purchases. About a third of our pairs after 12 weeks have been from repeat purchasers. And the average guy has bought 3.2 pairs when they're
Wow.
repeating, which is crazy because that's not typically the way guys act, right? They buy a pair of shoes, they wear them, and then 6 months later, when they wear out, they buy another pair. And so we've found that we've really solved problems for this guy, and he keeps coming back. We've got two guys. One guy's bought 14 pair, one guy's bought 12 pairs. So it's literally like one pair per week. So we know we're hitting it. This guy and sort of his heart and his mind, definitely.
I love it. So, talk a little bit about the anti-elite component, because I think that's important. It's like, well, there's also this idea that like people just want to be comfortable. I think COVID gave us the permission to be comfortable. I used to go to business meetings and conferences with a jacket, a button up, some kind of designer jeans laced up tight with a belt. And then, for a long time, I wore dress shoes, slip ons, usually loafers. And then now I'm to the point where I wear like I wear, a button up, but something kind of cool and more casual, more like surf, skate. I'll wear kind of the Lululemon that looks like a real pant, but it's still basically like a jogger. You want to kind of be like comfortable and not have to wear a belt and be kind of cinched into your clothes all day. And then, yeah, like I actually generally go for Vans with no socks as kind of my dress shoe. But, I think it's totally acceptable for people to wear sneakers as their kind of their business shoe now, especially if they look cool and if they aren't all scuffed up and messed up. So what do you think is kind of that wider philosophy that, the casualization of like business culture or just style in general, where people feel more comfortable prioritizing comfort?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It was you spent 12 or 18 months in your basement in a pair of slippers and sweatpants, right? And
Yep.
and then you're like, why would I give up that comfort if I don't have to? And you saw post COVID, the rise of, Uggs was killing it, Crocs was killing it, Hey Dude was killing it. I think running sneakers became, the thing because they drove that comfort point of view, and people realize like I don't have to give that up. And not everybody's going to a investment banking meeting in a pair of monk strap, unbelievably uncomfortable shoes and a suit and a tie, right? Like that's just not the way that business is conducted these days, unless you're in, LA or you're in Manhattan, right? And so I think we kind of got permission, and it's all been about like comfort because you don't necessarily have to sacrifice that, right? And we love it because that is our stock and trade, right? We make the most unbelievably comfortable shoes.
You mentioned this idea of, the percentage, I forget what percentage you mentioned, but the percentage of consumers that buy a particular sports shoe with the idea that someday I'll go run that Iron Man, or I'm going to do XYZ, but then it just becomes kind of their everyday sneaker. And they don't actually do any of those elite sports or those elite things. But is there still an aspirational lifestyle component that you guys are trying to lean into? That's outside of this like core sports thing. Is it like the aspiration of being a dad? Because you mentioned coaching the kids, or the aspiration of being a hard worker and be able to show up to work and get stand on your feet for 12 days. Are there other elements of affinity that you guys are trying to tap into?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely bucking the trend of big sneaker and elite performance. And the stat is 80% of people that buy sneakers do not do athletic pursuits in them, right? They just simply
Wow.
wear them because they're comfortable, right? And so we're supporting this guy that we think of as the engine room of America. And again, he's just trying to run life, right? He's just trying to be a good husband, a good parent, a good community member, and work hard at his job. I've probably done 35 focus groups with these guys, and they're just trying to be stand-up guys. They know they're not running a 4-4-40, right? Like, that's just not what they're about. They're just simply trying to run life and be a good contributor to society. And we just think they simply deserve a comfortable pair of sneakers, and from a brand perspective, a laugh. That's kind of what we're about, and what we're delivering here at Stoke Shoes.
I love it. Your co-founder's name sounds familiar to me. Was Ian Stewart the CMO of like a wetsuit company?
Yes, he
Let's
was.
go.
Excel. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ian's been on the show before, so I'm excited
Yeah.
to hear that we were talking about Santa Barbara and those beautiful houses on the cliffs. I think Ian lives in one of those beautiful houses on the cliffs
Yes.
in
So
Santa
he's our West Coast elite guy, and he is just an incredible marketer. Really smart, really quantitative, but also super intuitive. And for a wiry Aussie, he really
Barbara.
gets this guy that's in the middle of the country. And interesting enough, he was the VP of marketing at Converse when I was running the Chuck Taylor
Okay.
business. So
That's where you
he,
guys met.
yeah, he and I go back, over a decade. And he's one of those guys that we're having super passionate, conversations about, like, what's the best way to frame this, or talking about the sort of technologies that we got. And then the next minute we're like in tears laughing because he's got the most insane sense of humor. And so, yeah, he's been really a great partner. We got another guy, Billy Gorleski, who was with me from Hey Dude, as well as with Sperry. Pat Cho is a developer. He's also from Hey Dude and Sperry. And then Dipti Bhakta is our CFO, and she came with me from Hey Dude. So it's a team that's been around for 5 to 20 years, literally. And it's just been a lot of fun doing it with people that you like, that have great work ethics and great work styles, and everything's kind of shorthand. At the end of the day, we're having a lot of fun doing this, but we're doing some great stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. I just saw his name as I was reading through my notes here, and I was like, oh man, I think I know Ian. But yeah, he's a great marketer. It seems like you guys really have a lot of opportunity. You mentioned, I think, in an interview before that people should laugh out loud when they see some of these. You call them big sneaker ads, because they're so detached from reality. It seems like that gives you a lot of brevity to kind of latch onto and make fun of that kind of space. Almost feels like you guys have an opportunity to be the liquid death of sneakers. I'd be curious, how hard are you going to lean into that kind of pushing back against that performance mindset or that elite mindset in your marketing?
Yeah, I think we're gonna push real hard, right? Like Liquid Death, they are definitely our heroes. And when you think about all that they've done, because the world doesn't need another water, the world doesn't need another sneaker. And so we've been super focused on just creating great product for our guy. And then it's like, if you think about it, if a minivan company was having Formula One drivers in their ads, right? It's literally that same usage pattern that our guy has. And it's ridiculous when you think about it, right? It's all theater. It's all artifice, and so we acknowledge how these guys actually use these shoes, and we want to have fun doing it, and it's important to draw a distinction against the leaders, right? Like that's the way I think that we're going to make our the greatest claim on these 65 million guys, by pointing out the sort of the absurdity of how they're being marketed to from other big sneaker companies.
Yeah, to some degree, it's almost an insult, right? To, push this performance mindset down on your customers. If 80% of them aren't doing that stuff, then, like I get the idea of like focus on the core and everybody else is going to kind of come around it because they're all aspirational. But to some degree, it's like, it's the reason that these challenger brands came in and stole market share from Victoria's Secret, because not every woman looks like that when she puts that underwear on, nor does she have any illusions that she will or does, and then brands that started, talking to real people through advertising, creating marketing that looked and felt like the consumer versus some unattainable, vision of what they thought that their product avatar should be like.
Yeah, exactly. There's obviously a world in which aspirational marketing is awesome. I mean, that's been the archetype that big sneakers been built on. But I think it leaves, because there's such a disconnect between how people actually use and experience the product and how they're being marketed to. It just leaves a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing too is how do you market performance and market to this particular consumer, but also keeping the cool factor in mind, right? Like I think there's probably a period of time where New Balance was looked at as a dad shoe, or something that kids would never wear, and then the culture kind of came around, and then it became trendy and cool. Even you think about like Birkenstocks, man. Like I remember there was a period of time where like you wouldn't be caught in Birkenstocks unless you were like at a vegan restaurant or at a Grateful Dead show, and then it became like the hottest fashion accessory. What do you think creates those kind of, like that? There's like that core audience that's loyal no matter what, and they stick with the brand no matter what, and then there's these fluctuation moments where brands get to like breathe out and consume the culture. What do you think?
That's super great question. And I think so. Chuck Taylor would be a good example of that, right? That brand, Converse started in 1908. Chuck Taylor became a Converse athlete in 1917, and basically for about 85 years, that brand kind of oscillated between 10 and 20 million pairs sold per year, right? And there was this kind of like fiction that was built around like every 7 years there's a boom and a bust. And some of that was because they had their own factories in North Carolina. And when the consumer demand would wane a little bit, they kept making the same amount of pairs. And so what would invariably happen is they would reach the market and be marked down because there wasn't the demand for it, right? And
Mhm.
so it was one of those things that it exacerbated the trend. But when we got there in 2004, we were doing about 20 million pairs, and then 9 years later we were doing 75 million pairs. And I think, and by it was by far, so we did about 500 million pairs in that period of time, and was by far the biggest footwear statement ever. And it was interesting because it started out as being kind of counterculture, and then it obviously became just a ubiquitous youth culture statement, and we kind of hooked it to this idea of being a creative catalyst. And it was really kind of central to music, to art, to fashion, and really, like, we did some great things with it. And it at the end, it was like, even some of the stalwarts that had been with the brand for 30 years they recognized in girls that were 12 years old that were wearing a pink pair. They were still like, yep, that they're still part of our cult, right? Like
Mm,
they are still part of the team, which I thought was super interesting because that was one of the things we were concerned about, because it was really driven, at the end by younger women, those 13 to 24-year-olds buying it. And we found that it didn't alienate anybody else. And then your other example, Birkenstock, is a great one. Like
hmm
it certainly was a niche brand. And then I think COVID came along and the utility of that product was really recognized. Like the shoes are unbelievably comfortable. And then they've done a really great job and kind of iterating, holding on to that core comfort ideal, holding on to, great full grain leathers and that cork, and having that feel, but iterating it to lots of other different sandals, closed toe shoes. They've and they're also quality. They last, right? And so that's kind of, I think, the opposite example where utility is at the core of that brand and its success. And then on the Chuck Taylor side, I think it was really about just a kind of a cult and kind of a lifestyle statement, because Chuck Taylors are not, it's 100-year-old technology in a sense of, it's open cell foam as its padding. It's super narrow. And if you're over the age of 25, I think they're somewhat difficult to wear, right? But it was something that it what it stood for, I think, triumphed its utility. So I think those are two kind of polar opposites of brands that were inordinately successful, but I think for different reasons.
I love that. All right. So Stokes exploded on the scene with direct to consumer sellouts, but you guys, as we mentioned, are rapidly expanding into over 450 retail doors. You've talked about major chains that are kind of off the beaten path, or ones that are more familiar to a middle America audience, like Academy of Sports, Shields, or Rack Room. In an environment where a lot of DTC brands are struggling now, what did you guys do differently to secure rapid wholesale adoption? And, do you think that you guys are in an advantage where maybe these kind of middle America retailers haven't quite adopted this retail media strategy where it's pay to play and you got to buy media in order to get good shelf space and promotion?
Great question. I think that there's a couple things nested in that. I've always thought, for most brands, DTC is a channel and not necessarily a strategy per se. Then we've certainly all heard of DTC footwear brands that somehow inexplicably became an AI server business. But the one thing that I know, based on my experience at Hey Dude, is um, DTC is super important, right? You have that one-to-one relationship with the consumer. You understand what he's buying, when he's buying it. You've got the ability to have a deep conversation about, like, what does he think of the brand? What else would he like to the brand to do? But you also know that you can scale awareness much faster if you also have a retail business that's done through wholesale, right? And my example of that is when Crocs bought Hey Dude, I think the awareness was about 7%. And then after a couple of years of broadened distribution and just broader marketing investment, it got up to 32% awareness, right? And so I do think these things work hand in hand. And you have some consumers that, you know, they don't like to go out, and if they find a brand they like and they, you know, the sizing works for them, they're just going to continue to buy DTC. And then other folks, I think in particular, the folks that are buying STOKE, again, like you can't get that sense of, we can talk all we want about the holy shit comfort on our DTC,
Yeah,
but
trial is
it's
super
hard to,
important to slip them on.
yeah, when you slip them on, that's when, you know, yeah, absolutely, we hit the mark. So you definitely, you know, you definitely need both. And I think the retail experience is obviously also important, because that's kind of the moment of truth, right? The guy's got his wallet, he's 12 feet from the cash register, he's got a pair of your shoes on, he's obviously in active, you know, discovery to buy mode, versus he was served up you know, meta ad, and then all of a sudden he sort of became curious. So I really think you need both, and I don't think DTC is necessarily a strategy. I think it's a channel, and it's an important channel.
Love it. We talked a little bit about grassroots connections. I wanted to get your take on the New England Star Speedway partnership, positioning yourself as an official footwear on short track, pit crews, and race operations. Why is it more important to look at the grassroots in the motorsports brand versus going after, you know, obviously the guys behind the wheel, for instance? But really, you guys are helping the guys that are behind the scenes that keep these drivers on the road. That's your core audience. So can you talk about how a sponsorship like that works, and how do you bring that into your marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have two race teams out there um right now, aside from the New England Speedway. And you know, we were down in Nashville about 3 weeks ago, just meeting consumers, meeting the pit crews. And we actually we featured a bunch of them in our social media advertising, because these guys live large, that like they're on their feet 12 hours a day, right? They need something that's comfortable. You know, they're not the star of the show, right? They're not the athlete that's winning the race. They're that average all-American guy, you know, the engine room of America. That's our guy. And the way that they use these shoes is exactly how is representative of, you know, the 65 million guys that are working hard. And so we did some, you know, some clips around that for social media that have been really resonant with our consumer. And then we thought, you know, well, why don't we do some other things? You know, let's find some other speedways. Let's sponsor the guys that are in the pit crew. And you know, when you think about how they're using the shoes, and the fact that there's a lot of them and very few drivers, it just seemed to be something that was a, you know, a, something cool to do, and B, kind of a nod to our guy. And you know, it's been fantastic. It's been a lot of fun, because the other thing we know is, like, our guy is about you know, he's about football, he's about NASCAR, he you know, loves beer, loves barbecue, he loves his pickup truck. And you know, this really speaks to him. And he's our guy, and you know, we love him, and we love making sure that he feels great in the shoes. So I think it was just a good spark point, to get after and support these guys that are kind of in the crew.
I love it. Well, let's give everybody one more look at these beautiful shoes. Thank you again for the gift, Rick. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to give it a try
Wait,
myself.
Dylan, you
Yeah.
gotta show him, the outsole and all those
Okay.
bolts. We
Where's
get
is that on right back here?
Yeah, lots of bolts. We get more bolts per dollar than any other brand.
Let's go. I love
Yeah.
it. Very cool. All right, guys. Well, Rick, if folks at home want to continue to follow along with your guys' journey, connect with you, or find somewhere to try on a pair of Stokes or order a pair to try at their own home? Where do you want to send folks?
So stokeshoes.com, definitely. We've got a very broad assortment. We're in Shields, we're in Academy, two of the best sporting goods retailers. We're in Rack Room, we're in Shoe Department, we're in Shoe Sensation. Those are the best of the best in terms of family footwear. And then Murdoch's, Runnings, North 40 are in this really great Fleet Farm channel. So those are some of the places that you can go to and experience all that Stoke Shoes has to offer.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Rick. Really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with our audience. And for those of you who are at home, don't forget to give the show a follow or subscribe if this is the first time you're hanging out with us. And if you're listening to the show, a honest review on whatever podcast platform you might be listening would be a great benefit to us. And yeah, if you know a guy out there, 75% of American men over the ages of 35 who his feet get wide and they're tired after 12 hours. Don't forget to share the show with somebody who you think you might want to try these bad boys out with. Or if there's a marketer out there who maybe needs a master's class in marketing to all those cities and all those places between Los Angeles and New York, there's some brands that are having some big wins by focusing on audience that Wall Street and Madison Avenue have typically overlooked over the last few years. And or just somebody who you think would enjoy the conversation that I had with Rick today. Rick, tell Ian I said hi. Great surprise to hear his name come up in the research. And I will appreciate, thanks again for coming on and really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Dylan. Really appreciate the opportunity to tell the story of Stoke. Enjoy the shoes and let me know how they feel. Leave us a nice review.
You got it. Done deal. Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye-bye.